I'm Simon Mayberry. I'm Head of Employment Law at Balfour+Manson. I advise a lot of business owners, and I'm finding that frequently I'm receiving the same questions from them over and over again. And so I wanted to put together a couple of videos to answer some of those and give them an idea about what they might want to do in particular circumstances. Clients get in touch with me all the time about receiving grievances, and almost without fail, they panic about that. It's important for employers to realise grievances are a very common thing in employment law, and the first thing to do is not to panic. After taking a pause and not panicking about the grievance that they've just received, what employers should do is look at their policies. Employers often feel a little bit lost at this time, but the reality is, in the majority of situations, you will have internal rules that deal with this sort of situation. The vast majority of employers have a grievance policy. If you don't, then the ACAS website has a lot of really useful materials. A grievance is something that needs to be investigated, so it stands to reason, as a company, you need to put someone in charge of investigating the complaint that's been made. Ideally, that would be someone who isn't involved in the complaint and that is at a relatively high level of management so they can take decisions. That person then has to go and investigate what has been said. That might be very clear, it might not be very clear. What they need to do is look at the wording of the complaint that's come in and assess, what do I need to look at here? Do I understand enough about what's being said? Do I have to speak to the complainant in order to get a bit more detail before I go off and do my investigation? When they start investigating, it's always useful for that investigating officer to think about the type of evidence that might be available. Are there any witnesses that I need to speak to? Is it one person's word against another? Is there any CCTV evidence? Is there any documentary evidence? Is there anything that's been captured electronically that I could look at in order to help me decide what's happened here, essentially? What happens next is usually a grievance hearing held by the investigating officer with the complainant, and at that hearing, the investigating officer will present the evidence that they have uncovered, present what their initial findings are, and allow the complainant to respond to that. What I think is very important and is often overlooked by companies is asking the complainant what they're looking to get from the grievance process. My experience is that a large minority of people who raise grievances simply want to complain. They simply want to shout at the employer. They don't know what they want from this, but they know that they want to complain. Those sort of situations can be sorted out by asking the individual, what is it you want from this? And if they don't know, often that grievance won't go anywhere. After collecting all the evidence, speaking to the complainant, holding a grievance hearing, the individual who's investigating the grievance needs to reach a decision. Very often that's a point at which they'll come and speak to me in order to take advice, in order for me to help them with the drafting of an outcome letter, because you will want, as part of a paper trail, to send a letter to the complainant. In that letter, you want to be very clear about the different heads of the grievance, what you found, and whether you're upholding that element or not upholding that element. And then overall, whether you're upholding the grievance, not upholding the grievance, or upholding it in part, and what you're going to be doing next about that. You also want to give the individual the right to appeal, particularly if you're turning down large parts or all of the grievance. The appeal procedure is likely to be covered in the grievance process. If it's not, again, look to ACAS. But generally speaking, what you need to do is find another individual to hear any appeal. That individual should ideally, again, be independent of the complaint and should also preferably be more senior than the person who investigated the grievance initially. Generally speaking then, you're looking for someone at the top end of the organisation. Now, often when grievances are brought by people who themselves are quite senior, you may find that you're running out of people within the organisation to hear the appeal. In those instances, it's quite common for business owners to look externally, maybe to an HR consultant, possibly to an employment lawyer, who can assist with the hearing of an appeal independently.